And so, hi everyone. We've gathered here today to talk about AI and governance, and there's something that I wanted to do to save a lot of time, which was do the introductions of people and entities myself. And of course, the disclaimer here is that I am going to misrepresent and underrepresent each of us in the room here. But I think it's worth saving the time than having each person go around. So I know a bit about each of you, but not a ton. So again, that's my disclaimer, but just bear with me here. I think this is going to help a lot of people get up to speed. And the reason why some people are in this room is because I have had contact with you before, but also there are several people here that are not currently participating in Cardano or Catalyst ecosystem, and so it's just worth for everybody to get up to speed. So originally, Felix tweeted this question out about thinking about AI agents and how they'll play a role in liquid democracy and on-chain governance. A question is, how would an agent derep look like, and what would that disrupt? We need to think about these things now because they are definitely going to happen. So it's thank you, Felix, for the thought leadership and for the intention for bringing it together. Let me just put this into the group so that some links can get shared. And so that was the basis for the invitation. And we'll get back to kind of this question as like the main thought direction. Guyan here is, well, when I responded to this tweet, I included a comment called, which said, I still believe that there will be human at the helm, but AI in the loop. And that was stolen directly from Guyan, which Guyan, I mean, you can correct me if it's not yours, but I pulled it from you, and I'm assuming that that was like a thought developed in your direction. Is that true?
Yeah, it wasn't something I would take credit for, but yeah, it came out of a conversation I've had
Okay.
with a couple of folk. Yeah.
Okay. Guyan and I met virtually and then in person as he was presenting to like an industry conference at MIT, for which he's industry research fellow, CTO at Salesforce of Australia and New Zealand, and previously at the Reserve Bank of Australia, and has a couple papers, one of which directly features Cardano and kind of our DAO ecosystem, and Catalyst specifically. And Wolfram Blockchain Labs was kind of a subject in that study. And so he's really thinking about these things at a macroeconomic level. He's introducing this to industry folk, like these are the top 500 companies in the world uh, size that he's introducing liquid democracy to, and so has also put together a paper about the governance challenges of AI-enabled DAOs. So we're lucky to have Guyan in the conversation here. Another response to that tweet that I put out was, and I invited, who I think he wants to go by Elder Millennial, but I did have a direct conversation with him, and the application that he created specifically for MinSwap when they were going through the Fund 11 Fund 11 proposal voting. And what they did, from a very brief overview, was take all proposals in Fund 11, pass them through an LLM to find the ones that are most relevant to MinSwap's mission, discard the others, and then have two humans specifically focus on how to vote specifically on those proposals. And if those two come to consensus, then uh, that one gets a vote from the min swap pool, which I think is a direct observation of a DREP entity with AI at the helm, a human at the helm, AI in the loop kind of thing. And so there's a demo application that they have there. Another example that I can think of is from Spirit DAO, which is an Ethereum-based DAO. And Ron Rivers is a friend of mine, and I've been helping him develop Spirit DAO. But what he does is he's very forward-thinking and very actionable. And this entity is using LLM trained with the community text. He's integrated in LLM into the Telegram group and then feeds those queries back into the LLM and uses the LLM for faster onboarding into his DAO. So there's an example of that on the link called SenseMaker AI, and just thought this was a forward-looking example of how does one implement a large language model borderline AI use case into a DAO already. And I think he's doing a really great job. And that made me think of obviously Logan here and Clarity DAO and the DAO tooling ecosystem and smart contract treasury management. And so of course we couldn't have that conversation about treasury management and AI agents without thinking about what is the protocol for which a lot of us would build DAOs on top of. So it's good to have Logan in the room here. And then when I start to really think about the deep argument for how voting schemes should look, I think of Kenrick and Botrek because I think Kenrick's really getting to the heart of the matter of what's at least one of the obstacles that a decentralized voting system will face. And irregardless of the agent being a human or an AI, when you start to form coalitions or when you start to, what is a DREP besides a coalition? It is either, in traditional governance, we think of an individual representative, but in decentralized governance, like MinSwap's case, MinSwap is a DREP in theory, but it's made up of a larger group of humans. And so I think there's people in this room that would most definitely argue that we need to consider how voting weight versus voting power impact the fairness and equitability of a voting system. And so to me, Kenrick has to be in the room and has been raising the flags about voting schemes for a long time, and his research backs it up. Einstein is an editor on that research with Kenrick. I believe Einstein, you run the Ada North pool and participate in the governance workshops. And so you're deeply familiar and I believe have the interest in being a DREP yourself. So it's good to have you in the room from that perspective. And of course, there's a lot more that I don't know about you, but so apologies. Simon and Zerberus, Simon's in the room here, and Zerberus is a risk rating protocol, and I can't help but see how one might think about risk rating on DREP institutions or different metrics for understanding how one's past votes could explain how DREP at least from an analytical point of view, thinks about the upcoming Fund 12 vote or any other Cardano-based vote. So Simon, it's good to have you in the room as well. The Project Catalyst team, Danny, Chris, and many, many others. We all know Catalyst. Well, most of us know Catalyst. It's in its 12th iteration over many years. It's a massive innovation fund, and it's constantly evolving. One evolution is the alternative voting schemes that IOG and Fotrec are focusing on, and many, many other things too. What we found interesting in just kind of the recent weeks was, I think a question came up from Christine of the IOG Catalyst team about exploring the Catalyst documentation. Like there was an obstacle here. It was people ask a lot of the same questions. How do we more easily search our own docs or provide that answer more readily to the thousands of people who come into the Catalyst ecosystem every 3 months? And this, I don't know if it's known yet, but this Catalyst Docs Ask or Search at the top here is a LLM enabled search through the Catalyst documentation. So those applications are already, those features are already rolling out, and I wasn't aware of it. I don't know if she was either, but it's a question, it's a worthwhile question, and it's good to see that those are already directions being taken. Of course, things to know about Catalyst and the Catalyst data and analytics and a dashboard for navigation and literally everything else about Project Catalyst and and more is from Darlington and Lido Nation. And another thing to highlight from one of Darlington's initiatives is the proof ID at the end of town halls, which is show up there, scan the QR code, and receive a proof of identification for having attended town hall. So obviously, how does one think about identification or, obviously it doesn't limit an AI from screen grabbing the QR code, but it's worth thinking about identity in these spaces. And I think obviously Darlington's doing something innovative there. Cameron Foster, I don't believe is in the call, but what Cam is doing is he worked for the state of California, and he's found it really difficult to navigate the manuals that kind of inform what this government body does. And so his project that he calls Policy Genome Project is he's been taking multiple in-state government manuals, sending them through LLMs, and then having an agent embody those different governance agencies. And he's been running a podcast of having like the SEC talk to the FDA or different agents having communication, and then it's all voice verbalized, there's imagery to it, and it's like, hey, your blueprint is the manual provided by this government body. So what he's doing is innovative. It's I do think clearly pointing towards another direction of how one thinks about AI and governance. So I think it's unfortunate he's not in the room. But then, of course, Stephen Wolfram, what can I say here? Let's just say that a few years ago, he was asked to testify in front of Congress about algorithms, and it was mostly focused on social media, but he's a pioneer in computational contracts and computational language. He's been thinking about this for a long time. He just wrote a book, What is ChatGPT Doing and Why Does It Work? A lot of our initiatives internally here at Wolfram obviously are including large language models. And the main point here is that Wolfram language is both human readable and verifiable, and compiles easily to the computer. And the point being that when you have human at the helm, AI in the loop, you need a human to understand the code that it's running. Because ultimately, if we give up our responsibility to AI, who's held responsible? And I think, at least regulatory speaking, the human at the helm is an important thing. It's the reason why we still have pilots sitting in commercial planes. It's mostly flown by the autopilot, but in those 0.01% circumstances where you do need the human, or you need someone to be responsible for the problems of that body, obviously that's important. Last slide here. Myself and Arash is in this room. How we're trying to think about some things is a few different verticals. One is like Catalyst and Cardano governance data specifically. How do we, and we're calling this temporarily a navigator system. It's just, how does one take this vertical data, layer on top of our tools and integrating different LLMs, open and closed source, and then making that explorable. Same thing with on-chain data. We're looking into social data like forums, Reddit, Twitter, and then we're looking at obviously like pricing data. And if you were to wrap all of these together, what would that allow you to do in terms of the entire ecosystem of Cardano? So we come back full circle to the questions, and I think this is a good time for anyone to one add anything that's really important and specific to this AI powered blockchain governance conversation that I missed or I really misrepresented. I want to give people a chance to say something there. And then quickly, let's switch to asking some questions that I think arise from each of you. And then maybe we could do about 10 minutes of question gathering and then 10, 20 minutes of conversation. So anyone want to come off mute and re-share? I'm going to look at the chat now.
I have a very simple question, and maybe it's not the most educated question, but I still think it's important. In the diagram you showed before, right, there was the Wolfram large language module as a kind of the keystone. I think one thing that a lot of people worry about right now in the movement of AI is, of course, it's highly centralized. And now when we create this system somehow ingrained essentially in the governance process of a decentralized system, shouldn't be the underlying model as well somewhat decentralized? Excuse me if that's not if there's an obvious answer to that question, but it just stood out to me.
Yeah, these are our Wolfram language and integrations of large language models, both open source and closed source. The way that we would explore these data modules is obviously through our own technology with a large language model as a tool. So this is the LLM there is representative of, it could be OpenAI, it could be Mistral, it could be any, and so we're trying to make that a general availability of LLM being of coming in. On the
Thank
other
you.
side is how can we the research that we're doing is how can we abstract the workflow of how one would think about any community member? How would they think about a workflow that, here are the data modules and whatever LLM you want to use, whether that's an open or closed source, what is the workflow that would bring you through to get the answers that you're looking at or looking for? And that's hopefully that gives you the confidence that we're not trying to we're very much not trying to make our own train our own LLM, not that I'm aware of. And it is to both use our tools and then also enable everybody else how they can do that outside of our ecosystem. Yes, Einstein.
One comment to that question, because this is something me and Jose have been thinking about for DREP Charter. And one of the points we have there is like resilience of DREPs. I should suggest there should be a field for ethical AI governance, and we should move for decentralization of AI resources. And we should consider carefully using LLMs to find conflict and difference of interest instead of guiding principles to find common ground, shared values, and such. I have some easy wins I would like to discuss later, but from my concern side, that is one of my main concerns. Is like I want the AI to be tools for DREPs or even DREPs themselves, but they have to be part of the mission and goals of all DREPs, and we have to ensure that there's a resilience in governance, and that includes AI usage in governance.
Can you say, sorry, can you say what the large hesitation is again?
Okay, so my main concerns, like LLMs are excellent at aggregating data, but the problem is like how you choose to aggregate data really influences people. So if you use LLMs to try to find conflict, try to find difference of interest, try to find all of these like things that will grind governance to a halt, then that's problematic. If you use these tools to like find hidden collusions or open collaboration partners, that's fine. And using LLMs to find common social trends or similar proposals or patterns and categories, and aggregating direct voter actions and history, that's also great. But like we really need a field of ethical AI governance where we also consider like when is it damaging what these AI agents are doing.
Excellent. Good, good. Logan, I saw you had a comment in here, and maybe you just want to expand on it at all.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the concept is very high, or the comment is very high level. I guess for the recording, it's a comment that says AI can optimize humanity. And what I believe, I think what a lot of people on this call believe, what a lot of people probably watching this believe, is that DAOs and decentralized governance will ensure the transparent and accountable governance of AI. So it is a value add to humanity, and it doesn't go off the rails and be something that's, say, evil. So this technology, it's so powerful. It's going to seep into every vertical, every industry. And a technology as powerful as this, it shouldn't be handled by boardrooms. It should be handled by the people. It should be governed in a transparent way. So that's my high level thoughts on DAOs and AI. One thing that often comes up, in our Twitter spaces, in our community chats, is, like, how do you actually govern an LLM essentially with decentralized governance and automatically executing proposals? So one thing that we've been thinking about a lot and trying to technically figure out if it's even possible is automatically executing proposal effects that trigger GitHub commits. So if there's a change to an LLM, can there be an on-chain vote that's a on-chain proposal process that actually carries out the decision made by the people, so there's no longer that need to trust those centralized actors? I think that's one of the big things. That's also big with governing decentralized protocols and especially AI. So that's some things we think about, but yeah, that's what the comment was about.
Thank you. Darlington, you have your hand up.
That I do. Am I coming through, Claire?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, the question would be, how do we how do we seed some kind of sustainable model to keep having this conversation and iterating on AI and governance? Almost, whether that's getting it to a working group in Intersect. As Catalyst is getting working group too, but I almost feel like this effort needs how to maybe be a core effort that's happening alongside other conversations as a public good and not as a product or something that one or two or three companies are working on. Because AI is expensive. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, to go like this to this conversation, I think AI has, somebody's trying to put their hands around it and AI blasts it open and the cat is out of the bag. So how do we make a useful conversation continuously and not get drawn in a million directions? And I know from at least our work internally, it's been super well, it's been fascinating. But when you're doing research on AI and LLM models, and the next day things change and you update the research and things change, it's just it's funny, the speed, it's scary, and that's also the warranting of the question. Danny, you put a comment in here: decentralized versus transparent, what makes model go round? What data input is received and how it behaves? Do you want to expand on that comment at all?
Yeah, I can very briefly. I think language models are powerful tools, but very often there's still lack of clarity of like what makes them actually work in the first place, what data is being fed, what biases might that bring about. Like, just a very recent interview with the chief technical officer from OpenAI, where it's very challenging to actually get very simple answers to on like what those language models are being, taught and learned from. So I think understanding of like what is being fed into the language models and how does that impact the outcomes of what a lot of people will then rely upon, I think is a critical, transparent thing that always needs to be evident, especially within the ethos of decentralization and our ecosystems. So we know that it's not preconditioned to sort of like arrive at certain outcomes, which are driven by maybe interest groups or a closed, like when Logan talks about the boardrooms, right? Like where those things come in from. And then, equally so then language, how do the language models transpose between different languages, spoken languages, right? Like we often, I think, speak within the context of like how these things function within, I think more broadly within the English language or big languages, and like how does that actually dissipate and transfer correctly between the different language groups so that it can be really accessible across the board. Because one of the biggest barriers to entry in participation, whether it's in Catalyst and then sort of like pinching out of that bubble, is like, how do we create those local pockets of cultures which are not led by English in a language and equally by maybe English led or Anglo-Saxon culture in the first place? So just a couple of thoughts there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I know you're probably watching me take notes, which is like, listening and writing at the same time. It looks a little wonky, but I'm trying to capture at least the gist of things, and I'll go back through the recording. Felix.
You're doing an awesome host, Stephen. Calling people out, looking on the live chat, taking notes. Definitely. One important thing I would like to add is that because I hear LLMs very often, from my perspective, we should not limit ourselves too much to LLMs only in this regard, right? I think LLMs represent a very specific use case of AIs, or let's say in this regard, I would like to think more in agent side. So also thinking about a lot of new stuff what is coming up. quickly as well. We see action models, for example, we see whatnot other stuff, right? So LLMs, I think it's really good to have an eye on it, but also to make sure, okay, we keep the conversation broader on AI agents and different models as well, which will play a significant role here.
Yeah, okay. So you would say there's, you know, artificial general intelligence is the thing. Maybe your tweet was originally, I think, about AGI, and if I look at Singularity Net, what I'm seeing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think they should participate in there, that large language models are kind of down here relative to AGI. And so let's not miss the conversation for the thing that is the most powerful. And we're just getting stuck in conversation on LLMs right now because that's what's happening.
Wouldn't call it AGI because this is a very abstract term and there's a lot of weird understanding and can go very quick into dark rabbit holes, right? But from my perspective, I really like to think about agent swarms, right? Where you have specific agents and they act as an organism, right? We don't look on AI actually as, okay, we have this one AI and it's doing everything. You look more on a setup actually, right? So you have agent swarms then actually in this regard. Different agents with different roles and specific focus interacting as a larger corpus. Because I think this is where, when it comes to governance, where it makes more sense as well. Also, when we think about the technical infrastructure, where we want to say we want to imply decentralization for the AI itself as well on a strong level, right? So there's something where it becomes really interesting as well, and to say also on scalability, right? We say, okay, you look much more on a network of agents rather than on single nodes.
Right. Okay. That was it. Go ahead, Logan.
Yeah, I would like to expand on just hear from people in the room, like what types of agents do you imagine? Like, do we have one agent that's optimized for treasury growth and another agent that's optimized for, you know, sustainability of the treasury and like not spending too much, and another one that's optimized for, you know, maybe it's like onboarding, you know, tactics that the treasury should carry out? Or is it like an AI agent that takes on the Thomas Jefferson persona? It could be a lot of different things, and I think it could definitely get creative. And the fact that there's going to be liquid democracy and you can delegate a little here and delegate a little there and have kind of this swarm of AI agents voting on your behalf seems like a very captivating idea to me. So I would just love to hear the room about what different AI agents do you imagine and what roles do they play?
Can I just respond to that? I think I really like the way that this conversation's unfolding. I think autonomous agents are going to be key. Credentialing of the agents to be declaring exactly what their role is going to be important. Otherwise, whether you trust an agent to be doing what it actually says it's doing is going to become an issue in its own right. So I think having some kind of integrity around the role of agents is important. And so, you know, trusting agents and what they purport to be doing itself is going to become something that has to be considered. But I do think you'll have a vast range of different agents, and individual entities themselves may delegate to agents to act on their behalf, but then you may also have agents providing governance functions as well, auditing functions, trust assurance functions. You'll almost have a limitless range of agents potentially interoperating in a context.
Yeah. Oh, hands in the, okay. Einstein, I see, is at the top.
Yeah, I'll go quick and follow on with my code of conduct and ethical. What I imagine could happen is you will have AIs that track each DREP and actually functions as a shadow DREP that will actually predict what this DREP is going to vote. And that's sort of like a gray area. You could then make models about how a governance vote that you propose would be received by everyone. And that works as long as the data doesn't change. There's no black swan event or something. So I think we should really also look into that. Like, is that an acceptable use case? How accurate would it be? Does it give value to the governance that we do those prediction models? And maybe it does, because then you can actually predict if a proposal is going to be passed or not. So yeah.
Right, Kenrick? Muted?
You're Kenrick, you're muted.
Excuse me, I forget that. Yeah, as we get into the discussion on ethics, it becomes part of a larger problem of, what are the appropriate control systems for how AI agents and humans interact with each other. And part of why I've been doing this deep dive into consent-based decision-making is that it seems to get at a fundamental problem that any kind of voting system has, where there's two basic problems with voting systems. They tend to split into majority and minority communities, and then the majorities then make decisions that consolidate their power. So even in a democratic system, it converges to some kind of dictatorship. And I think when we look at AI, that's where we're really particularly concerned, is that most of the decision-making kind of processes that we're used to have sort of the problem of dictatorships built into them. And then this becomes an extreme problem when you talk about a super agent that has vastly more intelligence than our current human societies. And so there, where I think consent-based decision-making has an important role, is this idea that any minority has the ability to raise objections as long as it's done in a reasoned way. And that through that process of like peer review of decisions, there's maybe a chance to have a much stronger ethical foundation for how humans and AI agents interact with each other. So I'm quite interested, in it leads to the following kinds of questions then too. I think another question is just in the design of AI, how do you assure that the AIs themselves are decentralized agents rather than centralized agents? So like it's one thing to be open and transparent, but if it still converges to one gigantic AI that is sort of dominant over every other intelligence, you still have a problem. So anyways, these are the kinds of questions our team's been thinking about and wanting to contribute to.
So the one I was hearing that any voting system at least will have this kind of thing happen where there's majority and minority splits, and for power reasons, that minority would consolidate in order to continue to be able to have any effect in that voting system. Kenrick, did that capture what you said there? And then therefore that leads to what? I didn't pull that out.
It's more like the fact that voting systems are very vulnerable to capture, right? And so the kinds of governance that we have used in human societies may not work in a situation where you have this possibility of an AI becoming a super intelligence. And so it raises the point that we have to have much stronger governance systems that will provide an effective control system given the possibility of an AI superintelligence.
Right. Okay. Got that. That's, yeah, I agree. It's that the unpredictability of the potential that evolves from here on out is that in the governance structure, you have to have adaptability baked in, because if, for example, it gets captured and it's known that it's captured, there still has to be the way that, like, hey, red flag, this is captured, here's why, and we can adapt. And it's not that all the power has been already consolidated so that you couldn't win the vote anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank, so,
Please.
sorry, Felix. Thank you. Just one state of governance I thought might be worthwhile mentioning is crisis resolution. I think AI, at least the way we've seen it evolve, and I like the term used, Felix, around agents, not just generative AI. It's trained on large data sets and often oriented around processes and functions that we might anticipate, but often a critical role for governance, when it's most critical, is actually when a crisis unfolds. And in a conventional crisis, when it unfolds, we would typically look to someone who's appointed or accountable for resolving the crisis. We don't necessarily specify how they resolve their crisis. We rely on their wisdom or their experience to get us through the crisis. It'd be very interesting to see how would an AI or even a superintelligence, as Kendrick mentioned, actually manage a crisis for which there's really no precedent, perhaps, that could occur. That's where I think the concept of human at the helm, you mentioned the great example of an airline pilot. They're often there for a crisis, not for when things are going well. But we also know that, if they're not doing anything else except for a crisis, humans possibly aren't well equipped for dealing with a crisis in an urgent matter. And so I think crisis resolution is a whole subclass of scenario that has to be really considered when we're talking about the governance of a system.
Yeah, great point.
Michael, this is such a good conversation, really. I just love everything that's happening here. Though, looking on the time and knowing that definitely we will not find any solutions in an hour to this, but reflecting a little bit, I think so far it seems worth to everybody to say, oh, okay, this kind of conversation is important and could be worth definitely to be continued. In this regard, I would love to propose something. I know everybody here is very busy for good reasons. The world can be very happy that we are busy, knowing that everybody's really constrained by time. What do you think about maybe that we say, hey, let's make this maybe something like a bi-weekly or monthly call where we come together? In the meantime, figuring out already on ourselves, hey, where's this going to? What could be interesting? I would love to support anything what goes into a direction to bring this to a proposal and enable some funds to make this a serious thing over time. But what are general thoughts on the continuation of the thing here? I would love to go out of the meeting with something where I know, okay, good, that's the next step.
Yeah, thanks for being cognizant of the time, because I will have to end this meeting in 5 minutes. I'm I'm definitely interested in a monthly call, personally. It is not clear to me what the right action is besides feedback gathering, at least from my perspective. So from that point of view, bi-weekly or monthly is something that I could get behind. And I like to make this disclaimer that if we agree to some sort of consistent call. It is the option that that you can attend or not attend. And it is not a obligation that if you say to commit now that you must be there because of many of those time constraints. And I probably don't need to say that to this group, but if that, I'd be happy to extend the next call to another time, probably more of on a monthly basis or maybe every third week. But let me hear from others. What does next action look like for anybody here? Einstein, from a DREP perspective, and maybe I don't know if you had to go, but from a DREP perspective, like what does a DREP need to know? What does a DREP need for tooling? I've imagined DREP is overwhelmed having to go through thousands of proposals, and that would be the main function of the DREP.
Well, yeah, one of the things that's come up in all of the workshops on DREPs is like the need to organize for effective governance of DREPs. So what we see is that, for example, in the Nordics where I am, we plan to have a group of people because no one can be an expert on each topic. And I think AI can fit a role into that as well, like how to sort all this information and give recommendations. And then for the DREP to actually handle out the vote. So yeah, DREPs as an organization is a huge topic. And we see the similar in all of the other workshops in Bogota, in Tokyo, in London. That's coming up now. Probably we'll discuss this as well. And yeah, it's a global thing. Like all of us see the same pattern.
Logan, I can sense from some of the questions you in the direction you're going is like DAOs are clearly the structure that enables a group of humans to remain at the helm and vote and to, you know, of different sizes. You know, this could be, this to me is like the flexibility and the adaptability is that when you have a small group that are high trust, they're capable of knowing when something's going wrong. If they were to give more, let's say they bring an AI into the loop and it says, hey, all 5 of us in this DAO are going to just data dump ideas, and we want the AI to consolidate and then make a decision based on all of our feedback, because for us to all talk at the same time and get to a clear objective, let's just have the AI do it. And the AI puts out a response and all 5 are like, clearly not right. So we have consensus vote. Do we move forward or not? And yeah, sorry, I'm acknowledging time. I got carried away. I'm getting excited. Go ahead, Logan.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good thought. I mean, one thing I think about is like AI as somehow the proposal makers and the humans at the helm being the consent givers. I think that's one model that could be thought about. You know, yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Interesting. That's very interesting. That goes into if a AI is a proposal maker, it says something about what the template for prompting is, which
Yeah.
is something like you know, how does the Catalyst proposal ask the right questions, knowing that there's a large likelihood that an AI could be filling out everything based on feedback from humans. AI completes and submits proposal, and then humans just have to say yes or no. We take responsibility for what it said.
Yeah.
That's
so I mean,
interesting.
AI as the proposal maker and the proposal executioner is like where it gets next level. See, Danny. So yeah, there's a lot of things to think about there, but at the end of the day, the human element, the humans at the helm is always there. And, you know, there's obviously a balance to strike with, you know, humans and AI. And I deeply believe that humans need to be in control of the AI for the reasons that Kenrick was chatting about.
Yeah. Then apologies everyone, but let's wrap up on Danny's sentiment, which was comfortable having it not having immediate outcomes here, continuing conversation, see what spins out. And I think that's good enough for now. So deep gratitude for everybody coming here today. Felix, thanks again for being the thought leader and getting this going. I hope we heard from everybody, and at least why don't I set another time to speak, and we'll see what emerges from that one. And Felix, I'll talk to you in DMs. And thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Beautiful weekend, everybody.